Hi, we're at Gigrin Farm today in mid Wales. It's the red kite feeding station, and I've come primarily just to keep testing out the autofocus on this new OM-1 camera. It's the perfect place to try it out. The kite vary in their speed, so when they're flying around in a circle up above you, it's quite slow. You could actually manually focus on it, and any autofocus camera is going to cope with it very easily. It's when they start to twist and turn and dive down to the floor that the autofocus is likely to lose it. So I've been trying to concentrate on those shots. I've took a few up against the sky, but those should be easy. It's the diving shots, and because I haven't had to walk very far, I've carried the Sony A1 with the 200-600 as well as the Olympus 150-400 with the OM-1 body, and I've been using both and swapping from one to the other. Gigrin Farm has to be the best of the red kite feeding stations for photography. The light's in the right direction, you've got a bit of a slope in front of you. There are some tower hides you can rent out, you have to pay a lot more for those. You can actually just go in the general public hides and photograph perfectly well. In fact, in the early days when I used to come here, there weren't photography hides, you just went in the general hides. Currently that costs £8 for the public hides. And there's not a lot of difference. It does help to go in the tower hides. You have a bigger aperture here to poke your lens out of, and you're higher up, so you're more likely to get grass or trees behind the birds rather than the blue sky. I'll put the website for Gigrin Farm in the description under the video. In the year 2022, the most expensive tower hide was £35. This is the general hide, and this is a ground level hide, which I've never been in, but that's also £35, and you're at eye level with the birds. At 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, depending upon the time of year, when they feed them, the tractor comes in full of meat. My day at Gigrin confirmed exactly what I mentioned last week. The focus drifts out occasionally. You can have 20-30 very sharp frames, and then it will lose 1 frame or 2 frames and then come back into focus again. Several of you have mentioned you're having exactly the same experience. So just here on this frame it went slightly soft, and then the next frame was back in again. Just 1 out of about 50 in a short burst. And it's not a very demanding sequence. You would expect the autofocus to cope with this quite easily. I'll just show 3 pictures from this sequence of a kite coming towards me. The first one is sharp, the second one loses the focus, and the third one comes back into focus. And they are 3 sequential pictures. There wasn't as much blue sky around as I would like, but I'm there really just to test the autofocus rather than take pictures I'm likely to keep. I don't like white skies. But what I am trying to do is get the bird as it dives, because that's more difficult for the autofocus to lock onto. But just like the Sony A1, it copes very well when the birds come down to the ground, and they're small in the frame, but it still managed to track them, and against the trees as well. Go back to my Canon days with the 1DX, was the latest Canon camera I owned, and it wouldn't cope with this at all. The light was very variable on the day. Sometimes I was manually exposing and sometimes letting the camera do it on automatic, but the sun would come out for 10 seconds and then go back in, then it'd be soft light, then it'd be strong light. Very variable conditions, but the autofocus on the whole copes very, very well. So here's a diving sequence. As the bird twists and comes down, the only weakness here is the photographer is not moving the lens fast enough to keep up with it. So it goes out of the frame. Of course, you know the next thing that's coming, we're going to have automatic tripod heads. You will select which bird you want the tripod head to follow, and it will follow it automatically. And it will do a much better job than the photographer was doing here. I can only justify this by saying, remember, this is 50 frames per second, so I wasn't actually losing it for that long. But we are going to get to a stage where the photographer is really unnecessary. The equipment will do it all for us. For all of the stills pictures, the lens was wide open and I was aiming at a shutter speed of 2500 and upwards. Probably never went above 8,000ths of a second. And all with the bird subject tracking. When I was manually exposing, I would take a meter reading off this bit of floor here. Seemed fairly neutral sort of colours, and then stick into that. But unfortunately the sun would change very, very quickly, so I had to either keep doing it or give up in the end and go back to auto exposure, usually when the sun was shining. But here a diving sequence against the grass, and it coped with it very well. But the same situation as last week. The Sony would do better in keeping more frames sharp, it would lose less, but at the same time you get so many frames with the Olympus, 50 frames per second, that even if it loses one or two, you're still getting more sharp pictures than the Sony. So I'll just show you two pictures that were taken with the Sony camera, which is this one and a close-up as a bird came very, very tight towards me. I think the Olympus would have coped with this equally well. You can book all the hides up online before you come and pay and everything, and it's probably best to do so today, especially during the winter months. It is at its best in the winter. There's more birds coming in, although no complaints today. There's been more than enough birds. It's now the second week of April. But there was somebody else in the hide earlier, but I've waited for them to go before I do my bit to camera. It's very hard to pick up on which kite is going to dive. All I can really tell you is you watch them go round, and when they come down to sort of a medium height instead of very high, they come down to a medium height, pick up on one of those and they start to circle, and the circle becomes tighter, and then suddenly they dive, and then hopefully you're going to follow it. Easier to follow it when you're hand holding, but I say my arms are really aching after 1 hour of doing that, but I'm managing it on the tripod. I've just got the head nice and loose. I'll finish off with some slow motion footage taken with the Sony A1, and I use the Sony because it will autofocus in slow motion, which the Olympus won't. It's not brilliant in focusing in slow motion, but it will do it to a degree. In fact, some of them I might have given up and swapped over to manual focus, which I'm going to have to do with the Olympus. Although I do have another choice. I could go for the other Micro Four Third, the Lumix GH6, and use that for my video work, and use the Olympus OM-1 for stills photography. I still haven't decided what to do. I'm still playing around with it, getting used to the camera, but I am swinging towards the Olympus. I like it. I like the way it feels, I like the ergonomics of it. I don't keep accidentally pressing buttons like I do with the Sony A1, but time will see. Thanks for watching.